Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Ricky Tucker. Thank you for joining our show today. And I'm really pleased and proud and happy to interview our guest for today, Dr. Robert A. Connors, that is with an S. I want to make sure that I say that right. Dr. Connors, welcome today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing fine, Ricky, and please call me Bob.
I will definitely do so. We've talked before now, so I have to practice on that. So we'll go ahead and get that going today, Bob. But thank you very much for being so generous as to come and meet and interview with me and share all of the wonderful information and that and knowledge that you have with our audience today. So thank you very much. Looking forward to that. I've done some reading over all the work that you've done, maybe not all, because it seems like it's quite a bit, but just over the past few decades and the amazing work that you've done. So I'd really like to ask you to just kind of lead in by telling us, who Bob Connors, Dr. Bob Connors is, and just a little bit about you.
Well, thank you very much for the honor of letting me participate in this. It's appreciated. I was born of Irish English stock. My father grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and my mother was British, born in north of England, the Lake District. And their union began in 1945 at the end of World War II, where she was a war bride and came back to the United States with my father. My father remained in the military, and throughout the first 18 years or so of my life, I was a military brat. And we moved from place to place to place, and that exposure and that education of living in different countries, Spain, France, and England, among them, and moving as much as we did exposed me to a lot of variety of life and lifestyles and types and personalities and so forth. So I think I got a pretty expansive education just from that exposure, and it influenced me. But also, I was blessed with a mother who was particularly open minded, who had a perspective and a point of view that was not American and would often fight back or wasn't afraid to voice her disagreement when she saw things through a lens that might be different from what we were hearing around us in terms of an American perspective. So I always valued that, and she, of course, was very open-minded and high on education. Wanted us to get out and experience as much as we possibly could. So that influence, I think, pretty much followed me through the rest of my life, living under in other circumstances. In Spain, for instance, in the mid 1960s, I lived in a dictatorship, political dictatorship, but not under a dictatorship. That is the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, who was a fascist leader who installed himself as the caudillo, the leader, the Führer in Spain, with Hitler's support in 1939 at the end of the Spanish Civil War. And I got to see how these kinds of societies function. It was a very Orwellian society, although Spain really had not evolved much beyond the 19th century, even into the 1960s, in terms of its technology and its economy and so forth. So with this variety of, and of course my mother, as a British citizen, was actually drafted into the British Army during World War II, and served along with my uncle, who was shot down over Burma in World War II by the Japanese. My mom was a spotter at the on the coast during the Battle of Britain, which is when the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, bombed England mercilessly for about six to 8 months, every night in London and other points around Britain. And she was one of these young women. She was only 20 years old at the time, who spotted the incoming aircraft and reported that information back to a central location where the where the Brits could muster their air defense against the incoming German aircraft. And I was always very proud of that. And my father, of course, served in World War II. And I loved growing up in the military life. It's difficult for a kid to establish any roots, but the variety and the exposure and the richness of it, it's the impact of that was immeasurable. So I hope that it gave me a more open mind, an ability to maybe see some things from time to time from a perspective that might not be clouded with as much uniformity and certainty as you get when you are only operating from a singular perspective, like an American worldview.
So when did you guys move to the United States?
Well, we were back and forth. We spent some time. As a matter of fact, we were stationed at Patrick Air Force Base in Florida during the 1950s at the beginning of the space race. And as a matter of fact, I had an opportunity. I don't know if I should call it an opportunity because this was, I had, as a kid, I met Werner von Braun, who was America's rocket scientist who was responsible subsequently for putting America's first person on the moon. And was exposed to just a variety of exciting incidents, not the least of which was watching these rockets go up, usually once or twice a month from the Kennedy Space Center before it was called that. And so we lived there for a few years and then moved to Spain for 3 years in the 60s. And after that, went to England for our second tour. We had been there when I was much younger. And then spending a year in France en route. So there was a lot of moving around. In fact, every year of high school for me was spent in a different country. So I didn't move just from school to school. I moved from country to country. Although these were all American schools, it was a frenzied but probably rewarding experience.
Oh, that is awesome. So as you were talking, I was just thinking in terms of your view being more of a global view in such an early age. I would imagine that really shaped and formulated you to be, a pretty independent thinker, a pretty vast thinker. And at some point, I want to make sure that I sprinkle this in. I may be out of the timeline a little bit, but I definitely have to ask you about your mentor that you met at some
Yeah.
point in your life, because we talked about that earlier. So, and we can kind of go back and forth however you want to, but I want to make sure that we talk about your mentor, Dr. William R. Jones. You mentioned him to me earlier. So, at what point in your life did you actually meet him?
Well, Bill Jones was a fascinating, brilliant man. I took I had my doctoral committee for my doctorate in psychology. One of my outside serving members was Professor Jones, who was a professor of religion at Florida State University. He had come to FSU by way of Brown University, excuse me, by way of Howard University, Harvard, and for his master's in divinity, and Brown University for his PhD in religion and philosophy. As a matter of fact, I believe he was the first African American to receive a PhD in philosophy from an Ivy League institution in 1958. He was a brilliant man. He's passed about 10, 15 years ago now, and left an indelible mark on me, turned me around in terms of my perspective and my viewpoint in regard to issues surrounding race relations, race history, and that sort of thing, and relations between African Americans in particular and white people and white Americans. He developed a brilliant theory of the dynamics and mechanisms of racism and oppression. Brilliant enough such that Cornell West who ran for president most recently, but who was also a professor of religion and African American history at Brown University, and also, at Princeton University, and also at Harvard, uh, came to Florida State at the time of Dr. Jones's retirement celebration, and it was a large event, and he was the keynote speaker for that event. Uh, Professor West turned to Bill Jones with some frustration as Bill sat on the dais, and he said, "Bill, why haven't you written this theory up?" And he turned to the audience. He said, "Professor Jones has come up with the most brilliant explanation of the dynamics of racism and oppression that exists. There is nothing that comes close. But Bill, we need you to put it in a book, write it up, pass it on to us." Well, he never got around to that. So the rest of us, his disciples, are left with trying to piece it together and take it out into the world and see what we can do with it, because it is a brilliant explanation. Completely turn my perspective. I thought I had these, enlightened viewpoints around race and other issues, but I had no idea. And unfortunately, at that point, I had just gotten my PhD, so I thought I was all knowledgeable, omniscient. And I knew when I spoke about something that it was with the certainty that I had those initials behind me. But boy, I got an education, and I was humbled, and it was a good thing, because you come out with a little hubris and pride from those events. But he brought me down to earth real fast. Uh, I wish there was something that congealed in book form, or however we could do it. And I have tried a few times to put those things into words, but I just don't have his brilliance. I'm not stopping. I'm going to continue. But my thing has been that Bill did all the heavy lifting in the thinking and the formulation of how racism and how oppression and how the governance and establishment of hierarchies works from society to society. And it's such a generic explanation for the nature of hierarchies that we don't have to limit it to race. We can also talk about gender. We can also talk about hierarchies that are established based on religion or on language, however you want to set it up. The point is that the dynamics are sufficiently generic that they're identical. It's just that the content is different depending on what the nature of the hierarchy is. So, with that information, he invited me, and I was very honored by this, because I'm sitting in my office at FSU one day. I was in the American Studies program at FSU at the time, and I get a knock on the door, and there is Bill Jones with the door holding a tin, inside of which are lovely, delicious rum cakes. He gave me these Christmas rum cake muffins, or whatever they were. And it was by way of inviting me to join the faculty in Black Studies at Florida State University. I didn't know what to say. And I said, "Obviously, we have a problem here, don't we?" So he said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "I go out and I talk about a lot of things that put white people particularly on edge, because my theory is pretty straight shooting in terms of where culpability resides." He said, "When I try to present this information, it comes across to a lot of audiences, particularly if I'm trying to reach people emotionally, not only intellectually. It comes across to many audiences as the rage and the words of an angry black man." And he said, "I would like for us to work together on this theory. And to the extent that you feel like you can adopt it, or feel like it's something that works for you, I want to create situations where you go out there as well, and you create the cognitive dissonance that I can't create, because you are a white man speaking what I consider to be this truth to power. And people are going to have to figure out the dissonance in that. What are these words coming out of this man's mouth? And somehow come to terms with it." I thought it was an intriguing idea. And so I resolved, for that period of time, to sit at the knee of African American intellectualism with him so that I could learn this different perspective, this different worldview. Not to say that I could ever adopt it in full because of the fact that I am a white American, but at least I would have a perspective where I could present points of view in presentations, in lectures, or wherever I might go, that would cause people to take pause and consider the the truth of it. And it worked very well. At these presentations, Bill would, when he was a brilliant speaker. He was a contemporary of Martin Luther King in Boston when King went to Northeastern University and Bill was at Harvard. And so they had even met a couple of times on his way up because he had been a Baptist minister, child charismatic preacher, and could just was a brilliant speaker. And this I think in a nutshell, my perspective and my worldview changed as a result of this experience, and I've never really been the same since.
Well, that's awesome. So it's really impactful. As you were talking, I really heard you loud and clearly as you talked about capturing the work of Dr. Jones and not being able to duplicate that. But I wrote the word collaboration down. So maybe some of your peers that were involved with Dr. Jones as well, just kind of thinking in terms of, well, I know that you've got a number of papers and work that you've done, but it'd be so amazing to see about capturing some of those people that you've networked with in the past. And that also leads me to another question, and then we'll get back to some other research that you've actually done. But as you were talking, I'm in awe because I'm like a sponge here listening to you. But I was just wondering from you if you've written books yet. And if not, then we'll have to talk about that. And also, if you're going on speaking tours, because just me listening to you talk about your journey is quite intriguing. So, just kind of a two-part question.
Yeah. I suffer from the same affliction Dr. Jones did. I tend to want to do more than write about it. And so what I have tried to do is rather than, okay, I can go back and flesh all of this out, and I think there's a contribution to be made there, and I do know that others are doing it, people who are far more capable than I am. To get that message out there, which doesn't mean that I have given up on it. I'm still turning back to that work. I've had other distractions in my life in the last few years, and I'm coming back to my roots again. So I hope that's out there. But in terms of what I want to do going forward and what I've tried to do, it's partly been influenced, and I don't know where in these podcasts if you have mentioned our friend and associate Pastor Eugene Franklin.
I'm
Uh,
just writing his name down. You're reading my mind. That's my next question.
Well, then he is my other mentor. Gene has also opened my mind to a lot, and Gene is a man of action. Bill was a man of ideas, and the ideas really do have to precede the action in order to inform the action. And what Gene has come up with in terms of understanding the idea, and we don't have to get into it here if it's dealt with elsewhere, but the idea of cultural tourism and the forgotten histories and the discovery, particularly in the many cities in Florida, of African American history, rich African American history in these communities that can be the basis for economic development and commercial development in these communities around the theme of the history and the culture and the rich contributions you can find in almost every large, even middle-sized and small Florida city. Case in point, in De Villiers in Pensacola, where Pastor Franklin lives, trying to fight off gentrification and um, uh, uh, African Americans having to find other places to live in the city of Pensacola because of white gentrification. He's tried to come up with an idea to develop cultural tourism themes around the rich history of the African American experience in Pensacola. And this is a model that's transformative, and it also allows me to look at Professor Jones's ideas and to see where they can be incorporated into Gene's action plans so that we can bring about some sort of model for change that leads to commercial and economic development and wealth development for African Americans. Because in the end, in a capitalist society, I think we understand that wealth development is also where you also derive power. And that's the power deficit is always a problem in hierarchies and in oppression. And to the extent that wealth can be built, people may be listened to at some point. They may be able to affect change. And I use the word change, Professor. And what I really mean by change is correction. It's a theoretical concept that Professor Jones developed, in which he acknowledged that in order to correct for the injustices of the past, there has to be some transfer of economic, social, and political power from one group to another in order to redress the harm that has been done economically, socially, and politically. So I believe that now Gene understands that white participation in these sorts of things is always whimsical, and you can't rely on it. So this is an African American empowerment strategy that I really like, because it doesn't necessarily rely on white largesse or participation or paternalism or generosity, however you want to phrase it. It is African Americans working within a theme and a structure that allows them to build wealth independent of any other influences or forces. And I like the idea. He borrows liberally from Booker T. Washington. As a matter of fact, I just completed a poverty study with the consulting firm I was living with of Hampton, Virginia, where Hampton University resides, which is the alma mater of Booker T. Washington, ironically. So
Yeah, would you tell us more about that, because that was one of the things that I really wanted to get into, either that study or one of your others.
yeah, that was it was an opportunity to take Gene's ideas and Bill Jones's ideas out of the laboratory and put them into a real world application. Now, let's look at this, for what it is. It's a poverty study. Now, okay, we've had poverty study after poverty study after poverty, ad nauseum, and poverty is something that humanity has not been able to address or solve to anybody's satisfaction since the beginning of time. The inequalities, the hierarchies, the haves and the have-nots have always existed, and we have difficulty coming up with ways to bridge that gap. Although we do know how to do it, we just choose not to. In the case of Hampton, Virginia, okay, they have no resources to implement any recommendations that we are going to make because it's a poverty study and there isn't a lot of attention being paid to the roots of poverty these days, especially. So anything that you would have to do would have to be a reconfiguration or a rejiggering of the elements that are supposed to alleviate poverty. The programs, the food stamp programs, and the training and development programs, and the other things that we all know accompany these projects from place to place to place. It doesn't seem to change. The application of Pastor Franklin's idea was one of the recommendations we made. Okay, so we can't infuse money into this process. There is no more money available to you because money does make a difference when you're talking about poverty, which by definition is the lack of. And so if we don't have any power to influence any of these things or to increase financial support for a viable working anti-poverty program, then what must we do? Well, we hit on the idea that we just have to look at what is there and how we can network those things and make them work together more efficiently on behalf of people who need those services. So one of the things we did was decide we were going to try to recommend the development of an economic African American economic commercial class devoted to the cultural tourism idea, the idea of making visible the invisible but very lucrative history, African American history of history of African Americans in the city of Hampton, Virginia, and the surrounding area, and to create some sort of a cultural tourism path. This is something that's been done in other communities. I don't know it's been theoretically based as ours is, but in a way that would allow services to come more to residents rather than residents having to go and seek them out. And so what we did was we recommended the development of a cultural tourism theme in about 10 recommendations made to the city. This is how we think you can develop this African American business infrastructure in Hampton, Virginia. And it will increase, hopefully, it will increase employment opportunities, it will increase wealth development possibilities for businesses and so forth. And it dovetails with your current general tourism plan. And we can make these things work together. And oh, by the way, you've got Hampton University right in your backyard. And you can bring the resources from Hampton University into the mix, and we can leverage the availability of such things as local public schools. One thing that we've done in Tallahassee here is a few years back, I served on a committee in the public schools that looked at the allocation of Title I funds to public schools. There was only like $7 or $8 million in the pot, and there are like 32 schools, public schools in the city of Tallahassee. We decided to designate a community school in a predominantly African American community in Tallahassee, where we could bring in the resources from Florida A&M University, Florida State University, and bring services to the residents at times and make them available at times that were convenient for the locals, so that we could use the public school facilities during non-school hours or off-school hours, and get more utilization of those facilities. So the school people like that idea, and services then would be provided to community members, assistance with filling out tax forms, looking at the availability of AFDC services and so on and so forth. FSU has a medical school, and they provide dental and medical, healthcare screening services for residents. And so the things that are usually difficult for people to get to, or they may have issues of affordability, they just can't afford to pay for the services, we are bringing to this community school. And the community school is providing these services to the community, including employment opportunities and training and that sort of thing. Now, this was not our model. This is built on a model that was promoted by the Florida Children's Home Society, which is generally linked to adoptions. As a matter of fact, I've adopted 2 children through the Florida Children's Home Society, and
Great.
and it is, but they also feel strongly about these kinds of affiliations in the city, in a number of cities, 20 or 30 cities around the state of Florida, and they provide resources, they provide an infrastructure and support for these kinds of things. So we built this model, and we linked Florida State, Florida A&M, Leon County Public Schools, which is the Tallahassee schools, and the Children's Home Society, into a team that would work together. And also we incorporated representatives from city government. And we, so with this model, we were able to provide this community school. Now, fast forward back to, or let's go back to Hampton, Virginia. We tried to replicate this model in Hampton, Virginia. So It's up to them whether they want to do it. But a lot of it had to do with coordinating and streamlining information and services that already existed in the Hampton city government, in the churches. What kinds of services and support is available for the various churches, and making it more ecumenical and bringing white churches into the mix, and bringing a closer union and cooperation among the African American churches in the community. Provide the information, working with government and working with the schools out of a hub of a community school, a designated community school in some strategic location in a predominantly African American community or neighborhood in Hampton, in a way that would make these services and this information that is needed to deal with issues of poverty more convenient to locals. When you don't have a budget, when you don't have any money to do anything, all you're left is reconfiguring what's there. Now, it is theoretically based. What I like about this is normally people do these things out of some sense of paternalism or goodness of their heart, but but this has got a theoretical basis, both in Professor Jones's theory and in Gene Franklin's approach to things. So getting back to why I'm not doing as much writing as I might want to do, I like the idea of getting out there and trying to apply some of these concepts that I learned while I was at Black Studies, and what I've learned in working with Gene Franklin to see if we can put legs on this thing and make it run.
Yeah, because you get a lot more with boots on the ground. So, boy, that's really, really amazing. And as you were talking, I will tell you that Pastor Franklin is so amazing that you brought his name up because I was going to fire that one off to you next. So I'm glad that you just spiritually walked right into that one. And as you were talking, I remember some of the first days and weeks and months that I was able to meet and talk with Pastor Franklin. He took me down to the villas and showed me that space, that community, that, as you know, we've been talking about those forgotten communities. And he showed me his vision in real life and in real time. And little did I know that my wife and my in-laws, who are both in heaven now, we would experience that. My mom on my wife's side and my dad on my wife's side and my brother and sister on my wife's side, they are actually not very far from the Davillas. So we would go to, in Pensacola, this one restaurant that Pastor Franklin was sharing with me was more of like an anchor to his vision. And within that one restaurant, everything that we've been talking about all this time, art, culture, food, music, and it just had
Yeah.
a spiritual feeling. So I saw that all wrapped into this one place,
Yes.
and I thought, wow, what a visionary to have that concept throughout
Yes.
that entire area. So, you having boots on the ground, I see now that makes a lot of sense that you would be investing that time in working versus just writing because you're touching a whole lot of lives. So that study that you talked about in Hampton, tell us about a study that I guess another study that you have led or been a part of that you really find that's one that really touches you, that you're really proud of.
Well, there are a couple. One that has more to do with education and special education that I'm particularly proud of. With this same government consulting company where I worked on the Hampton project, um, had to do with reviewing uh, the efficiency, the track record of the New York State Special Education Program, which is massive. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of kids. It's a big state, population wise. and we were charged with doing a review of their interventions, their services, the clients, the clientele they served, and so on and so forth, to determine their effectiveness. Now, it so happened that that we were at a point of inflection in time because the legislature, which was Republican controlled back then, and I believe Pataki was the governor, a Republican governor, was all about cutting back on government services, shrinking government, making government smaller. And man, they had special education in their crosshairs, and the axe was going to be sharp and brutal. And we, you do these studies and you bring integrity to them, no matter what the data shows you. It is the data, and there's the book written Lies, Damn Lies, and Statistics. I can't remember who the author was, but it came out of the 70s. You can take your data and manipulate it to make it say almost anything you want, but sometimes it stands alone. And in this case, we tried to conduct this with as much integrity as possible, and came up with some concepts that I think really were helpful to our analysis. But in the end, the results and our findings proved that the special education programs in the state of New York were very effective. I will say moderately effective. Let's not get carried away. But just I think what we brought to that process in terms of the integrity, but also in search of what we thought might be truth in this, um, uh, the special education programs in the state of New York were spared the budget hacks, and so they did not lose tens of millions of dollars, and clients were not forced off of special education support roles and that sort of thing. Even though we had nothing to do necessarily with the value or the record of their services, we were at least able to bring a credible analytical framework to the analysis that that gave it integrity. And so I'd like to say we saved New York special education. I can't take that credit, but I'm very proud of that. And then a second one that does have a more racially tinged or oriented theme is a project that we did for Charlottesville, Virginia, just in the aftermath of the Nazi and skinhead and confrontations there in the run-up to the 2016 election, where Trump said that there are good people on both sides, and the city of Charlottesville was just mortified by all of this, and they asked us to come in and do a disparity study looking at the criminal justice system. And we did a soup to nuts evaluation from arrest to sentencing of racial disparities in the Charlottesville criminal justice system, and identified problematic opportunities where we saw, problematic data points along the continuum from arrest to sentencing in which racism was clearly rearing its ugly head. We identified it, we pointed it out, and we made recommendations to change it.
Wow. That is awesome. That's very powerful. And what you're doing is, as you're talking, just really walking us through a timeline. So I want to be respectful of your time here too, as we start winding down. One of the things, kind of bringing this up to today's date, you talked about 2017 and the study that you did in Charlottesville. I was just kind of thinking, going back to Dr. Jones and then him and Pastor Franklin, and with their vision and insight, and realizing how valuable you and your thinking and your study would be to them, and how valuable theirs would be to you.
Yeah.
We realize that Dr. Jones is with us in spirit. Dr. Franklin and Pastor Franklin is still here, and my desire is for him to actually see some of his work being done. So since you, myself, Pastor Franklin's team, we're all still here. We're in the trenches. From your vantage point, what would you say that you could do, you will do? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here too. You will do, and some things that the rest of the team members can really do to help to make this vision of developing these forgotten communities by using art, culture, music, spirituality, and food. How would you think we could collectively move forward to help these communities?
Well, it's important not to take on too big of a bite here. I think Dr. Pastor Franklin has the right approach here. He's got sort of this global overall perspective, where the website that is being developed, and forgive me, I don't know the latest title for the organization. What used to be the Pan African Cultural Heritage Institute.
Yeah,
Is that
Panchi. Uh-huh.
Yeah? Is that what we use now still?
For
Be-
now, yes.
because I know we're going through a transformation, and that's to be done with patience, and of course. But in order to be efficient here, I think it's important, maybe, to find a uh, a place where we can use as a pilot test site. It's not to
Great.
say manipulating people and experimenting with them or anything like these, because I think these ideas that Dr. Jones and Pastor Franklin have come up with can work. I think they have utility. Uh, and if we can, I know Pastor Franklin is doing a pilot test of his own in Pensacola. Um, I'm based here in Tallahassee. There are a lot of opportunities here in Tallahassee. And oh, by the way, Tallahassee is the most uh, racially segregated community in the United States economically. There was a study done by Jeffrey Canada, I believe his name was. He is an economist who looked at, just did a nationwide, in the United States, did a nationwide review of economic disparities in communities around the country, and found that Florida State, Tallahassee is the most economically, racially segregated community in the United States. So we've got a lot of work to do here. Having said that, Tallahassee also has a very rich history, African American history, and Frenchtown, which was a sort of the seedbed of Tallahassee, the Tallahassee Civil Rights Movement, which spawned many of Martin Luther King's lieutenants, with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and so forth. Has a very rich history that we can leverage around this cultural tourism theme. There are other cities, obviously. Dr. Frank, Mr. I want to call him doctor, so I'm going to give him a doctorate. Dr.
Well, there you
Franklin,
go.
he deserves one anyway, honorary doctor.
Absolutely.
So I would like to see that develop in a community where we can test out, run some ideas, and see what we can develop. Then we'll have a replicable model that maybe we can take from venue to venue and seed other similar projects going forward. You know, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and
Absolutely.
we have to make sure we're planting our foot on fertile ground.
Wow. Well, I like both of those, that first step and the fertile ground. So maybe from a divine standpoint, maybe that's where we're being led. So as we think of that, I'd like to just close out by saying thank you very much once again for your time, your patience.
Thank you. Oh, not at all. No,
Yes, indeed.
no. You always you got a guy who likes to talk about himself.
Oh man. Well, I tell you
Not,
what.
I'm just kidding.
No, I
I
need you made that crystal clear the last time that we talked that you really don't like talking about yourself, and I can appreciate that. And my response to you was you I can understand that, but you have so much richness from the work that you have done. So it makes it easy to talk about the work that you have done. And quite honestly, on the heels of that work, there's so many people that have benefited from that and will continue to benefit from that. So, as we close out, I would just like to say thank you again for allowing yourself to be used and allowing your intelligence to be used for the sake of helping others.
Well, that's very kind, and I look forward to working with you. I understand that you are a linchpin in this process, and so I think as we go along, we can probably cross fertilize here and share ideas and make something happen.
Okay, sounds good. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much once again for viewing with us today. And we've had the honor and pleasure of talking with just really a conversation with Dr. Robert A. Connors. And I'll work on that Bob piece. But Dr. Connors, for now, thank you so very much.
Yes, sir. It's been
Alrighty.
my
All the best to you.
and I appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best to you and your family.
Likewise. Thank you so much.